I'm Francesca Benatti. I'm a researcher in digital humanities at the Open University, and I lead the CHEES training program in arts and humanities in the digital age. So, as Paul said, I'm going to give you a brief overview on the reason why we believe you should learn about digital humanities as part of your training course. In 2002, Jerome McGann, who's a prominent literary scholar and a pioneer in digital humanists, predicted that in 50 years' time, our entire way of doing humanities research would be transformed by the availability of digital material, either born digital or digitized from other states. And it would seem that, if anything, it was erring on the side of caution. The amount of digital content that has been created in recent years is truly staggering. To put it in a comparative framework, the entire works of a canonical literary author like Samuel Taylor Coleridge, here represented, amount, when digitized, to about 100 megabytes of content. The Library of Congress was estimated in 1997, if entirely digitized, would occupy about 20 petabytes. You have a conversion rate at the bottom. And, but already in 2013, the total amount of digital content in the world was estimated around 3 to 4 zettabytes. And a zettabyte is the equivalent of 1 trillion gigabytes. And already, this is an old estimate, already it's probably twice that much, around 6 to 7 zettabytes. Even if we look closer to home at the UK Web Archive, which only archives .uk websites and only started 2 years ago, it already contains over 70,000 instances of individual websites for a respectable 26 terabytes of content. And the total amount is only going to grow. So when put in this perspective, in this scale, the works of a single person like Coleridge seem like an atom in a universe of data, as Andrew Prescott put it. Some scholars really don't like this state of things. This is an extract from a series of articles that literary critic Stanley Fish published in the New York Times early in 2012. And I think you can see that he totally dismisses the digital humanities and says they have no place in the kind of criticism that he practices, which he goes on to say is based on the experiences of a lone reader facing a stable text provided by an author who dictates the shape of reading. One wonders which of the 18 known versions of Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner would fit Fish's idea of a stable text. But there are other scholars that instead take a more pragmatic approach to our relationship with the digital world. This is Alistair Dunning from then JISC in 2012, now the European Library. He comments that, yes, at this stage, we are surrounded by the digital humanities. We are surrounded by the internet, and we've got to accept this fact. Nonetheless, I think we need to reflect critically on what it means as scholars to be surrounded by a digital world. And I think a historical perspective, I'm a literary scholar, but a historical perspective can help us. After all, we have already encountered technological change in the way we do research. When the main means of communicating knowledge was manuscripts, there were fewer texts available, and those were read and studied in an intensive way, detailed, sustained, intensive way. When print took over, more texts became available, and they were read differently, in a more extensive way, with lesser depth but greater breadth. And those factors enable, for example, the rise of more comparative perspectives. So what can we expect as researchers in the digital age then? Well, once again, let's look at an example from that previous technological transition of how a manuscript humanist became a print humanist. And I'm talking about perhaps the greatest Renaissance printer after Gutenberg, Aldus Manutius, or Aldus for short, who in 1495 opened a printing workshop in Venice. He actually came to printing relatively late, in his 40s. He started off his career as a scholar, wanting to study Greek literature and culture. But he realized that the new technology of print could be harnessed to create new scholarly opportunities. And as a printer, so Aldus created, for example, italic type, which had a beautiful design, but occupied less space than rounded Roman type. And by the way, Times New Roman, the ubiquitous font on computers, is derived from Aldus's Roman typeface, so we're still following in his footsteps. He was the first printer to use Greek typeface, and hence to enable Greek texts to be available for the first time since antiquity in the Greek language and not in a Latin translation. He invented a new punctuation mark, the semicolon, to mark a logical pause that was intermediate between the comma and the full stop. And he created portable editions that were relatively more affordable than the large, lavishly illustrated volumes, which he also published. Indeed, Aldus's work was a collaboration. His greatest works were a collaboration with the leading humanists of his day, like Erasmus or Cardinal Pietro Bembo, for example. Together with them, he created beautifully designed books that followed the leading scholarly methods of his time. And they enabled new forms of scholarship, and they became the basis of an education curriculum based on the classics, which was to dominate European education for the next 400 years. None of this would have been possible without Manutius' an introduction of Greek typeface, portable edition, and so on. So his path in the print age, I think, is very similar to what we should follow now that we're in the digital age. Aldus engaged with the new technology of his day and shaped it to suit his intellectual needs and to create new intellectual possibilities. So we need to develop tools and methods that can help us make sense of these new sources of information, be they born digital data created in the last few years or digitized versions of previous cultural works. And we need those tools and methods to be suited to the needs of the arts and humanities. So to work both at the new large scale of the big data, the exabytes, the zettabytes of data, and at the small scale of the close reading, of the study of a single author, of a single period, of a single idea. That is one of the hallmarks of the humanities. And as said by one of the prominent digital scholars in a Chase University, Tim Hitchcock from Sussex, we need to use both ends of the macroscope, the large scale data, and to still be able to write small, beautiful histories of small things, which is one of the hallmarks of research in the humanities. And the digital age needs us. It needs the critical eye of the humanists. As said here by Ken Price, he was the editor of the Whitman Archive, one of the first digital humanities projects. Mere digitization produces information. By contrast, scholarly editing, or more broadly, scholarly research produces knowledge. And this is what we should be doing as humanists in the digital age. Thank you.